Good morning, everyone. In last class, we tried to conclude the causes of the Second World War, and in this class, we're going to go on talking about the Second World War and to talk about the course of the Second World War. Firstly, we're going to start with a little review for the road to the Second World War. Firstly, the further expansion of Italy and Germany under the appeasement policy adopted by Britain and France. So first, Italy in 1935, they invaded Abyssinia, and in 1939, after they joined together with Germany as the Axis power, they further invade Albania. And also for Germany, in 1938, Germany, they occupied firstly, Sudetenland, which is a part of Czechoslovakia, with the excuses that most of the people live in Sudetenland, they were Germans. And also, the next year, in March 1939, Germany further occupied the whole Czechoslovakia with a similar claim. And also, on September the 1st, 1939, 1 week after the signing of the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact with USSR, Germany, they can feel free to invade to Poland, which without the declaration of war. So it's very obvious that for the early ages, when Hitler tried to expand to different places, he always get different excuses, right? So because he's thinking of the people live in that place, they were Germans. But finally, when he further invade to Poland, he already showed everyone that this is an invasion instead of like a unification, right, or liberation, right. So this is a time when also Britain and France, they can't tolerate any further expansion from Germany anymore. So this is a time when Britain and France, they start to change their policy towards aggressions. Firstly, they realized that the appeasement policy had failed to stop any aggression. Actually, on the contrary, it encouraged the aggressions of these aggressors, right? So when Germany invaded Poland on September the 1st, 1939, without issuing a declaration of war, actually, you can thank to Hitler by not really declaring those wars, because when we learn about the First World War, remember we used the whole page of PowerPoint to see the roadmap to the First World War, while the countries, they declare war to each other in different dates. So now, since Hitler didn't really like to declare war, this is the reason why we don't have another same kind of map when it comes to the Second World War. So Britain and France, they sent an ultimatum. So actually, they try to respond to them, but of course without any reply. Of course, like Hitler at that time, they already fully prepared for another war, right? This is the whole point why they have to rearm their country. So without any reply from Germany, on September the 3rd, they declared war on Germany, and then the Second World War broke out. So for Second World War, firstly, we need to identify the camp, because this war is also like the First World War. It's a conflict between two opposition camps. Sent an ultimatum without any reply from Germany, they declared war. So we need to identify the Allied powers and the Axis powers. You can finish it on your notes first and then check the answers here. Firstly, like the German flag, the US, this is like Hungary's flag, this is obviously Finland, Japan, this is the Nanjing government, right? And also Finland, and also these are the flags for those countries. And also Germany, do you think they are Allied powers or Axis powers? Of course, Axis power, right? How about Hungary? Also Axis powers. And then Japan, Axis powers. United States, Allied powers, but they didn't really join at the beginning of the war. We're going to talk about this. And then Chinese, do you think Allied or Axis? Of course, Allied, because we are under the invasion of Japan, right? This is also how we involved in the Second World War. And then Finland, actually Axis powers. And then Britain, Allied powers. France, Allied powers, Italy, Axis power, Soviet Union. Do you think Soviet Union should belong to the same camp with Germany or belong to the same camp with like Britain and France? Actually, they joined the Allied powers because even though they signed the Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact to promise each other that they won't attack each other within 10 years, but actually only after 2 years, Hitler already started their invasion to USSR. This is the reason why Soviet Union directly joined the Allied powers after that, and they joined the Grand Alliance to fight against Nazi Germany. In Belgium, of course, Allied powers. Australia, of course, Allied powers. So the two opposite camps, one is Allied powers, one is Axis powers. And also from this map, you can see like most of the powers actually they belong to the Allied powers. So firstly, the early triumph of the Axis powers from 1939 to 1942. So from this the title of the topic is obvious that at the first few years, Hitler and his Axis powers was taking an advantageous position in the war. So we're going to learn about the military strategies adopted by the Nazi Germany, which make them to achieve so many victories in such a short time. This is what we called the BLITZKRIEG. So what's BLITZKRIEG? Firstly, we're going to see some comments from the historian. Never before in the history of modern warfare had a nation been so quickly and thoroughly defeated as was Poland to the Nazi onslaught. They described their invasion as onslaught. Of course, this battle was the first time in the history of warfare the capabilities of modern weapons were exploited. So you have to see that although tanks, aircrafts, these modern weaponry has already been used in the First World War, these modern weapons, they were still very new and primitive. People, they still having studies on how to make use of make the best use of these weapons. No one knew how to make the most of their capabilities, or the use of these weapons was limited. But after the First World War, people start to study on these weaponries. 20 years of experimentation and study on how planes and tanks they could be used in war. In addition to improvement in technology combined to create an overwhelmingly effective fighting force. So this new force used speedy firepower and a multi-dimensional attack to get deep into enemy's territory, to break through static defenses and surround the enemy forces and attack from all directions. This is what we called the BLITZKRIEG, or the lightning war. Like in English, lightning war. So I conclude the principle of BLITZKRIEG warfare as three basic principles. That is S, surprise, and S, speedy, and also C, concentration. Surprise means their movements were actually unpredictable, and speed means their attacks always finish in only a few hours of their attack, and try to finish their battle in a short time. And concentration is because when they try to attack one place, they always firstly to identify a weak point instead of just sending people to the front line. They always have one focus or two focus points for them to focus their attraction with a heavily armed army to attack. And then step 2 is penetrate. And then encircle. So you can see this is a very new style of military strategies at that time. So let's explain the BLITZKRIEG step by step to see how powerful it was. Okay. So for example, this is the enemy spot, and this is the target place where the Nazi Germany tried to take over So firstly, what will they do is they going to identify a weak spot in the enemy's defensive line. Just like here, when we talk about the principles, we talk about the concentration. Instead of sending people in the front line and line up as a line, they will send their heavy armed troops into a identified weak spot to make the whole attack more effective. And then the infantry troops create a smoke screen to hide forces gathering for a breakthrough. So what they were going to do here is they will set the smoke screens bomber to create a smoke screen. So they are unpredictable, right? Because of these smoke screens, that's the time when the enemies, they were not able to identify where you come from. They can't really stop you in a very efficient way, right? And also next, planes bomb military and civilian target behind the lines. So this is a time when they send the plane to the enemy's spot and use all those plane bombers to shock the people and to turn like mentally and physically turn them down, right? And also, more importantly, the paratroopers sent from the plane, they're going to disrupt the communication and slow the movements of the enemy reinforcement. So when they cut the communication, actually for the enemy spot, they were not really able to react in a very efficient way since their communication has been cut, right? So this actually gave Nazi Germany, their troops more time to get more places and in a very efficient way, right? And then tanks break through the weak spot, spread panic among the troops and civilians. So you can see a reason why the casualties for Nazi Germany under Blitzkrieg was so small is because you can see they sent all these bombers, planes, and also the tanks first, right? So for the first few steps, there's almost no involvement for the infantry troops. That means before people were there, all these modern weaponries has already gave a thorough sweep to the enemy's spot. That is the reason why it is very effective, and also more importantly, the casualties for the Nazi Germany has become really low. The motorized divisions move through the opening and circle back, just like the map here, right? Penetrate and then encircle, surround the enemy force from behind. And last but not the least, here comes the infantry. But they only need to take care of any remaining areas of resistance, right? That means all these modern weapons, tanks, airplanes, battle planes already help them to take care most of the enemies. The only thing they need to do is to take over the area. This is the reason why Blitzkrieg had been so powerful at that time, just like in this GIF, right? Firstly, concentration, the enemy spot tried to encircle them back, but actually because of their strategy, they encircle back of the enemies, right? This was actually in September 1942, but you have to see the reason why Germany has become so powerful, and they almost, actually can see here, all the red places were under the influence and occupation of Axis power. So Blitzkrieg has become a very important factor to lead to their early years achievements in the Second World War. So let's make a conclusion on the occupation of Poland. Who were in an advantageous position? Axis powers, right? So in September, Germany occupied Poland. On September 1st, the Second World War broke out. Germany adopted Blitzkrieg strategy and successfully occupied Poland with less than a month. So now Germany has Czechoslovakia, Austria, Hungary, Poland. So where do you think they should go? Directly to attack Britain or directly go to France? But actually, you need to see one important thing is the position of Denmark and Norway. Since these two countries, actually they always regard as key requirements to win Britain. One reason, of course, is because of the geographical condition. If they can take over these two countries, actually it's easier for them to have a advantageous position if they are having a war with Britain, because they can surround Britain and send supplies and troops in a very effective way, right? But more importantly, it's because one important source about the iron ore supply from Sweden. You can see Sweden located here and Norway, Denmark located here. So why the iron ore in Sweden has made these two countries so important? You need to see that without the Swedish iron ore, actually the German war effort would grind to a halt, because not only was the ore being sent in large quantities, but it was also of very high quality, like the iron ore from Swedish, making German steel manufacture extremely efficient. So you can see this is Sweden, this is Norway, and actually here should be Denmark, right? So you can see in this map, country Kiruna or Memberget, actually these two places were the places where the iron ore extracted, and then after extract those iron ore, they will be sent to a rail line, and then in the rail line it will link to the Narvik and the Luleå. These two places were the ports where they transport those iron ore back to Germany. So you can see Norway can be important because one of the important port to transport their strategic source was located in Norway, right? So as a conclusion, just to ensure they can smoothly get all these iron ore supplies from Sweden, this is the reason why they need to have Norway and Denmark first before they really try to invade France or Britain, because they need the source to help their heavy industry to build all those weaponries, which is a very important supply during the war. So between April and May, actually just in 2 months, right? 1940, Germany conquered Denmark, Norway, and even Holland, Belgium, and Luxembourg just in 2 months. So you can see how the Blitzkrieg has been so effective in the war, right? So who should be their next target? Now they have Denmark, Norway, even Holland, Luxembourg, and also Belgium, right? Next, maybe should be France. Remember how did Germany invade France in the First World War? The Schlieffen Plan, right? Do you think the French people, they were allowed the same thing happen to them? Just let the history repeat itself? Actually, in this time, France played as a good student because they get fully prepared for any invasion from Germany. They built the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line was one of the largest military structure ever built, second only to the Great War of China. It includes a series of bunkers, forts, turrets, and also obstacles that span more than 450 miles of France's border with Germany. You can see here with the Maginot Line, so they can make sure that Germany, they were not able to attack them directly from the borders, so they can put their heavy troops into their borders and can actually regard Belgium and Luxembourg as their buffer zone from Germany's attack, right? And it was built between 1930 and 1940, so actually they prepared a decade earlier, almost a decade earlier. It was one of the world's most impressive forts, yet it proved to be okay. Happily, yes, this is a huge work, but sad is, it is almost useless. So in their mind, actually the French troops, they sat comfortably in a train of formidable, highly sophisticated underground force extending along the French-German border, the Maginot Line, a line of defensive fortifications that were intended to protect France from a possible German invasion. So this is the reason why confidence that the German planned to fight in Belgium and the northern France, the Allies decided to move the bulk of their forces into Belgium to stop them. But the reserve army was moved far westward to back up the British and French forces defending Belgium and Holland. This is the reason why these moves left a gap at the Maginot Line, between the Maginot Line and the Ardennes forest, that is like the borders for the Belgium. It has left them a gap for Germany to attack. And also, do you remember the three main features for the Blitzkrieg? The first one is surprise. The second one is speed, and then C, concentration. That means the first thing they're going to do is to identify a weak spot on the defensive line, right? So when France and the Allied troops, they actually left a gap in their borderline. Of course, this gap has become the weak spot, which was identified by German troops and become the target of the Blitzkrieg. But still, we have to see this is a very huge work, a hard-working student for France at this time, right? It's still a very sophisticated military structures ever built. You can see this is the blueprint for that. Actually, this is another blueprint. You can see they actually even create some cinemas where they can have place to watch movies, and even gymnasium, and also official quarters, telephone bureau, hospital, even have subways, and then all these things were built underground. You can see this is the borderline between Germany and France, and they try to build all these things within a mountain, so it can really be a very sophisticated hard work for them to build, right? So this is more of a reality. This is an imaginary map blueprint for them. So actually, you still can visit Maginot Line these days if you travel to France. You can see they still leave some artillery there, and you can see this is the whole fort was built under the ground of a mountain, right? And they have all these pillbox, and also within the Maginot Line, actually they also have this railway, which easier for them to transport different facilities. But just sadly, they leave this gap for Germany. This is also the reason why in mid-June 1940, Paris was captured by Germany. And also Hitler, everyone went to Paris. Maybe the most important thing is to take a photo with the Eiffel Tower, right? So same for Hitler. His generals before the Eiffel Tower in Paris. So in June, actually just few weeks, right? In June, Germany occupied France. Paris was also captured on June 13, while France surrendered to Germany on June the 22nd. So still, the advantageous position for the Axis powers. And after this, actually, we also have one very important battle. That is the Battle of Dunkirk. This is a time when Hitler almost captured the whole France. So there's still a large amount of troops located in France. At this time, they try to evacuate from France and try to retreat so they can maybe go back to France at some point. But at this time, they need to evacuate from the place. So the Battle of Dunkirk, it was a defense and evacuation to Britain of British and other Allied forces in Europe from 26th of May to 4th of June 1940. In the end, more than 330,000 Allied troops were rescued. This battle is important, not only that it's important because there's a movie about it. It's also important because of these people, they were escaped from France and they were able to rescue more than 300,000 people they were able to rescue from this kind of like battle of defense. These people actually take a very important role in the later battle. For example, the Battle of Britain, and also more importantly the D-Day. So this is like a very also can be like a very important like battle within the Second World War. So important that there's a movie about the Dunkirk. You can watch that movie if you have time and if you have source. So it's obvious that who will be the next target? The Britain, right? You can see every other nation had fallen to German military force to their blitzkrieg in just weeks. Hitler believed that it would only take a few weeks to force Britain to surrender, but unfortunately for the Germans, Britain did not cooperate with their plans. So despite the heavy loss and brutal bombing of the cities, Britain refused to give up. So you can see actually the bombing attack from Germany is devastated. Like they have to suffer huge loss, not only all the buildings, right? From July to December 1940, German warplanes bombed Britain day and night, but failed to make it surrender. You can see that London Bridge is falling down, right? And also you can see the children, they like homeless, and also people, they were like hiding in some shelter. And also you can see after the air raid, like not a single building is really remain at what it looked like at the old time, right? So this is time of Battle of Britain. Still, Axis powers were in an advantageous position. They began to attack Britain in the Battle of Britain. Do you think they successfully to make them surrender or failed to make them surrender? Actually, they failed to make them surrender, and it continued to bomb it until 1941. So why Britain can be so tough for them to be made to surrender? We have to thank to two things. The first thing is radar. Radar will win the war. You can see this is Hitler. So why radar can be important? What's the function for radar? Radar can be important because radar can predict the attack, right? Like here, if they were sending like air raids or the plane bombing, actually radar can attack it at an early age, can provide early warnings and eliminate the surprise. Because as we all know, one of the most important features for the blitzkrieg is the surprise when they were unpredictable, right? But now, thanks to radar, their attacks have become like predictable, right? So give time for people to find the place to like escape from any bombing attack, right? And next is Britain morale remains high. The reason why the morale of Britain can remain high is because their very important leader, Prime Minister of Britain, Winston Churchill. If you're going through hell, keep going. So at that time, he thinks the Battle of Britain is the utmost important battle within Europe. If Britain give up, actually the whole Europe will like in Hitler's hand, right? So he thinks it is his job and responsibility not only to stay tough for Britain, more importantly to stay tough for the humankind. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. So Britain, of course, because now in the mainland of Europe, Hitler has already like took over most of the countries, right? So Britain has become like almost one last great power left in Europe, right? So if we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free, and life of the world may move forward into broad. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the US, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, which was led under Adolf Hitler, under Nazis' rule, right? So let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that men will say, this was their finest hour. So it is our responsibility to stay firm, not only for us, but for the humankind. So now I'm going to play a little video about Winston Churchill to let you know more about him as the leader of Britain at that time.
Woeful Second World War.
The British Prime Minister during World War II was Winston Churchill. He was an inspirational leader who liked to work hard. Very, very hard indeed.
So, that is the plan for the D-Day landings. Grand in scale, audacious in nature. What say you, General? General!
What? Where? Man the guns!
General, have you been listening to a word I've been saying?
I'm sorry, Prime Minister. No.
Well, at least Pamela would have gotten it down. Pamela!
Sorry, Prime Minister, I must have dropped off for a minute.
Right. Well, I was just telling the General... General!
I'm sorry, PM. It's just we've been up till gone 4 nearly every night this week.
Some of us need to sleep. We can't all work the hours you do, Prime Minister.
How can we sleep when we need to plan the D-Day landings? The greatest single-day waterborne invasion of all time.
But you never stop, sir. And you even take work with you into the toilet. How do you keep it up?
Cigars and champagne, my boy.
Can I possibly borrow a couple of matches?
Be my guest, Pamela. Here. Try some champers. Should wake you up a bit.
Thank you, sir. Cheers.
So, D-Day. A fleet of 5,000 vessels will transport 160,000 troops, landing across a 50-mile stretch of the Normandy coastline. There we will begin the long, hard push to Berlin, Hitler, and victory.
With all due respect, sir, that's not funny. There is a war on.
Very well. Maybe it is time I went to bed.
At last.
Yes.
But don't worry. I've had a desk specially made to fit over it, so we can continue this meeting in our Jim Jams. General, bring the map.
It's 40 winks. I just really must get my head down, you know. It just won't be long. Just 20 minutes or so.
Oh, wait.
No, I'm awake. Yes, it's true. Churchill really did have a desk built to fit over his bed so he could carry on working at night. Churchill inspired everyone in Britain to get behind the war effort.
So after the video, you know, if you want to really become a great leader, one important thing is you need to work really hard, right? So now you can see that Germany actually failed their attacks to Britain, right? So should they go on attacking Britain or should they move their focus? Actually, Hitler chose to move their focus, and this is also the time when in June 1941 Germany suddenly attacked the Soviet Union. So this is a time when the other war front has also started. You can see in this photo German tanks advancing in the Soviet Union. So from this map, do you think his invasion was a successful one or not? You can see this is a German invasion route, and also actually they were closing to Moscow, right? So you can see the attack came as a complete surprise to the leader of Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin. Despite repeated intelligence warning, like people already warned Stalin that Hitler is coming, which included the precise date and hour of Germany's incipient assault, Stalin remained convinced that he would not risk an Eastern war as long as the British Empire remained undefeated. But first few months, you can see what happened is he just sent the troops to Soviet Union, right? The date of 22nd of June was late for the starting a campaign over such a vast area. But German commanders were confident that the Soviet armed force were primitive and that the Soviet people were waiting for liberation. So, and actually for Hitler, since the Blitzkrieg has been so effective, he is expecting a victory by the early autumn. That is just in few months, right? Do you think it's possible? So you can see this is the time in like from 1941 to 1942. You can see the first few months, actually the Blitzkrieg had worked brilliantly, right? Everything had gone as Hitler planned. Firstly, Germany had encircled vast numbers of enemy troops. The enemy air force was destroyed, right? Thousands of tanks and artillery pieces had been captured. Hundreds of miles of territory captured were now in Nazi hands. And by autumn, the German forces had destroyed most of the Red Army and the Russian Air Force, surrounded and besieged Leningrad, where over 1 million people died of starvation and cold, and were approaching the outskirts of Moscow. They were at the gate of Moscow. So this is time when the things turn out is like do or die, right? So next class, we're going to talk about the Battle of Stalingrad, to see how Battle of Stalingrad can play as a turning point for at least the Eastern Front for the Second World War, to save USSR from Nazi Germany's hand. Okay, see you in next class.